Hi, everyone. I'm really excited to be here. And I have to say, this is actually my first time in Copenhagen, and I have fully immersed myself. What a magical city you guys have here. So I'm incredibly excited about virtual reality and immersive technology. I mean, think about the last time that you were truly blown away by something, or maybe even the first time. Because for me, it was about 5 years ago when I first tried virtual reality. I had never experienced something so game-changing and revolutionary. And I just remember thinking, like, wow, this changes things. It changes everything. And it got me thinking, when people discovered that the world was, in fact, not flat, it opened a literal new world of ideas and advancements and discoveries that forever changed the course of history and accelerated the pace of change itself. Our fundamental perspective was upended. We went from being the center of everything to realizing that we were swinging around a star, hurtling through this vast and limitless universe full of stars. So from a content perspective, we've been living in this flat world up until now. And it's this notion of anti-flat entertainment that gets me so excited, because we're no longer bound by these 2D rectangular screens and limited by the storytelling and communicating and traveling through these 2D rectangular boxes. This new world is, again, upending the current order, and it's going to transform the way that we work, live, and consume. And when done right, it creates fundamentally higher levels of engagement. So when you think about sort of the evolution of technology, radio sort of allowed us to transmit voices across networks, and TV and film gave us moving pictures, and the internet and mobile devices gave us access to information and education and learning and a two-way dialogue. Well, with virtual reality, it allows you to actually broadcast experiences. And this is really exciting because it reminds me of this quote by Confucius that basically says, "I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, I do and I understand." So you may be listening to me right now and forget what I have to say in the next hour, or you may find me later and just remember seeing me somewhere, but you're not going to forget actually being here. And this is a really powerful thing for virtual reality, because instead of actually looking at stories, you actually get to participate and be involved in the story. It transforms everything from marketing and gaming to education and entertainment. So VR really combines the best of both physical and digital worlds to create something radically different. We're no longer consumed as a witness to an experience, but as a participant within the experience. So whether it's VR or AR or XR or MR, these are all just acronyms for the umbrella term of immersive technology. So I think a lot of times people get really hung up on what these acronyms are and the different platforms, but the reality is that all of these devices are temporary, and it's all part of an evolution. But the evolution is immersive technology, which is really this kind of last frontier. The hardware and technology will constantly change. It's currently happening at this breakneck pace. So, as marketers, that's kind of my first thing to call out right now, is that you should really stop selling VR and start selling experiences. Because experiences are what give consumers the reason to try the headset. It's what you can actually do. It's not just looking at photos of people wearing a headset that doesn't really explain anything. One way to put it is that when you're advertising a movie, the movie companies don't come out and advertise the movie by showing images of people sitting in their seats, like smiling and giggling with their reactions, just in the same way that movie theaters don't advertise the movie by showing what the theater looks like and that you're going to sit in this chair and you're going to watch this screen right in front of you. So I really encourage everyone to kind of don't get so hung up on the hardware. A very sort of oversimplified version of this is going back to my ship analogy, is when people discovered the world wasn't flat, they didn't really care what the ship looked like. And they weren't just sitting around saying, who made the ship? And, is shipbuilding going to improve? Maybe I'll just wait for the next couple of years, and then I'll go out and discover. No, I mean, at least those that were conquering new lands weren't. It's really about what people are discovering, this new world of possibilities that immersive technology brings. So don't focus on the hardware, and in fact, let's just put it aside, because I'm kind of tired of talking about the technology. What I really want to talk to you guys today is about how we can use this technology to storytell. We're in the midst of creating a new language of experiences. that's going to define how we interact with this technology and the stories they carry going forward. One of the problems with getting too entangled in the technology side of things is that it can leave you only building in the future. So while there's been a lot of talk about what problems immersive technology can solve, 5 years from now, sure, some of these solutions have been 5, 10, 20, or 30 years off already, because imagining is an important part of inventing. But today, I'm going to talk to you about what can be done now and the problems that we're solving now that you couldn't be solved before. And I want to talk to you about creative disruption, because it's not just tech disruption that's happening. It's really creative disruption that's the game changer. Because we're disrupting the way that we tell stories, the way that we approach content creation, the roles and the expertise required to create content. We're disrupting how the audience participates in this new spherical world of content. We're disrupting how they interact with the technology. We're disrupting the way that employees will start training at and within your organizations. And we're disrupting everything from the creative workflow and processes to the production pipelines and output. We are immersivepreneurs. And just like any other new medium, they require new tools and new ways of thinking. So at our company, at Specular Theory, I had to have this math formula as a marketer that X equals Y. And when you're solving for X, you're basically creating experiences with a purpose. So why is it VR? Or why is it AR? Like, what impact do you want to have on your audience? These are all types of questions that you should kind of begin the process with. Really think about what purpose it has. Don't get so hung up on, oh, it needs to be in a headset, or it needs to be on my phone and with AR type stuff. Building truly authentic and transformative and unique experiences is what we do every day at Specular Theory. It's why we do what we do. And it's won us a bunch of awards, and sure, that's really fun. But it's about creating new experiences and solving problems that literally haven't been able to solve until now because of this technology. It's what keeps us there late and gets us up early. My partner, Morris May, worked in Hollywood visual effects for over 25 years. He was the CG supervisor on 2 Academy Award-winning films and has worked on probably 30-plus blockbuster films. At a time when VFX was being increasingly outsourced overseas, it became Morris's job to create stronger technologies and a better pipeline so that you could reduce labor costs and save money, but at the same time produce more and more powerful results. It's the perfect blend of artistry and science. We created Specular Theory to solve a lot of the same problems for VR and created a custom-built pipeline from the ground up to create this fundamentally new kind of studio. We're building the tools and the categories of content to help transform these experiences. Now, I had brought over 15 years of marketing and working with brands and agencies to the table, so I really kind of have a brand-centric and marketing lens to kind of add to the perfect complement of my business partner's visual effects kung fu. Our name, Specular Theory, comes from this story. Morris rewrote the algorithm for the way that 3D cars get rendered, making 3D cars indistinguishable from real cars, even to people who make cars. And if any of you have ever worked on a car commercial, you know that car people are super picky about the way their car looks. So it's by no mean feat. Our philosophy is to really integrate this into our workflow and pipeline and challenge the perception of what's possible by questioning its assumptions. Original thinking is part of our DNA. If it doesn't exist, we build it. And it's not just the production and the technical side of things that you need. It's really being an equal part of all 3 of these things. So the fact that you can be a creative agency and a production studio and a technology company, because what's happening right now is you have a lot of tech companies that don't know how to storytell, or you've got creative agencies that don't understand the tech well enough, and you've got production studios who have never worked with brands or agencies, so they don't really understand the KPIs. And they're also trying to figure out the tech. So it's really kind of having this equal balance and at that intersection that innovation lives. But again, the technology has to be in service of the storytelling. It's got to break the barriers of a mindset, traditional mindset, and the presumptions that went into creating for flat rectangular screens. It's got to be of the new medium and in the medium you're telling. I have to have a sip of water real quick. I apologize. Okay. So let's start talking about uniquely immersive experiences. And by uniquely immersive, I mean stories and concepts that can only be told in that device. Like if you can have the same experience on another device, then we believe it's not truly authentic for VR. So you don't just want to optimize for the headset. You actually want to create something entirely new and shoot it and film it in an entirely different way to really make it authentic, because you've got to give people a reason to wear the headset. So to give you some examples, in 2014, we created one of the first VR films to go to Sundance called Perspective. And this was Perspective Chapter 1, The Party. The idea was that we created a VR series where you sort of tackle hot-button issues in society and use the power of VR to become another person. That's an example of something you cannot do with any other technology. So in this case, and because it was for Sundance, we had Perspective Chapter 1, The Party, which is about essentially a sexual assault that takes place on a college campus. And you have two different perspectives. So for the first 5 minutes, you're a female at the party, and you're drinking, and events unfold, and then it fades to black. In the second 5 minutes, you're the guy, but you're now the guy's perspective, talking to the girl that you just were, and reliving the same event. So you live them through entirely different perspectives. And at the time, this was 2014 when we actually shot it, so you can imagine we had to build all of our own cameras. It was actually about 220 degrees and not fully 360, because that just wasn't even possible at that time. But we sort of used the creative and disadvantages of VR at the time to our advantage. And what I mean by that is, we had this take place at a college party, so you're kind of drinking, you get a little buzzed, and that sort of worked in our favor for, pixelation and overcoming problems with that. It was one of probably the most successful and powerful pieces to launch out of Sundance that year. It was so powerful that we were invited by Tony Atkins, the California Speaker of the House, to show it to the entire California State Assembly. And we still get emails every day from colleges and women and people around the world who want to study and share this experience. So it's just, again, that really good example of you can't become another person in any other device. So the fact that you can really be in their perspective and walk in their shoes is really a powerful thing. And while we were actually at Sundance, I can tell you too, it was interesting because, sadly, to watch women go through this experience, it was maybe something they were more accustomed to or prepared for. But when you actually watched men go through the experience and they were the perspective of the women, we had men walk out in tears. I mean, it was that impactful. This is kind of what some of the press had to say about it. I mean, MTV said, it was the most chilling, powerful experience they've ever had using a screen. TechCrunch said, the empathy machine works. So it kind of just goes to show that you can create lasting narratives when you have the right creative. And I can sort of tell you firsthand that when the story is good, no one complains about the headset. And when the experience is bad, people start complaining about the pixels. And it's really that simple. So if you have the right authentic use in the creative, again, you're going to have a successful piece. That following year, we took Perspective Chapter 1, and we came back to Sundance, and this time we're at Tribeca with Perspective Chapter 2. Perspective Chapter 2 was 4 perspectives that we shot instead of the 2 in full 360 live action. And this one tackled police violence, and is basically about a small misdemeanor with these kids that things escalate and there's a very bad ending. What was interesting about this one is, we shot it in Brooklyn and New York, and it's just at the time, when you're having to have all these homemade cameras and they only require so much lithium that you can fly with, you can imagine the production challenges that come along with that. But it was really interesting because we were shooting and the cameras are so small that in Brooklyn, people were walking by the experience and they didn't know what was going on because all they saw were these policemen arguing with these 2 kids and they couldn't tell that we were a film crew. So we actually organically had people in the experience when you turn your head and you look around and they're all, taping it with their phones because they think something is bad happening and they're trying to be careful. But this was also another powerful piece because you're essentially the perspective of both police officers. You're the perspective of a kid and the kid's brother who actually gets shot, so you get shot in the experience. And it just kind of goes to show that this is how life happens, right? You always walk into events at different times. And so who's to say, would you have had that same opinion if you were in fact in their shoes? Kind of just a note on this one too with the sound, which I don't have here. We worked with Dolby Atmos, and it's kind of a good example too of all the creative things that you really want to think through. So in this case, we had Dolby Atmos to essentially make it so you can not only see, but you can hear as the other person as well. So some of the nuances that you'll hear in audio that you really have to kind of think through is, in this particular case, when you're the perspective of the police officers, you hear a little bit more siren noise and city noise in the background, and that's because most police officers are, trained to sort of have an ear for being alert. But when you're the kids' perspective, you'll notice a little more playground noises and like birds chirping, and it's very, very subtle. You probably wouldn't even really notice it except for the fact that I've just now told you. But I do encourage, if you do watch it, you can kind of listen out for that. It's just something you take for granted in VR. Okay, moving on to happier content. In 2015, that same year, we created a music video called the Donnys the Amys for their song Run Around. I have to say one of the hardest things about actually being a VR content creator is having to show it on a 2D screen. So this is available on YouTube in 360, but for these purposes, just kind of like a clip from it. But this was really exciting because it was kind of the first piece to really move everything in one take. And we were, kind of ahead of its time on that level. We had to build our own cameras, and we had to attach it to a robot, and then we had to drive the robot through this room. But you'll notice there's like always something happening around you, and these are really important things for VR. I think in this example, it's kind of a fun experiment, but it won Best Music Video in 2015. And it was just kind of a great way to sort of leverage music and the length of songs to sort of recreate the way that we tell music videos. And in this experience, you sort of feel like you're behind the scenes, and you also feel like you're there on set. Another example was we created the Terminator Genesis YouTube Chronicles in 360, and we used a lot of big YouTube stars in this piece to sort of leverage the power of influencers and create ancillary content that could be used to have a movie tie-in and promotion. We also had to build a new custom rig for this piece as well, and when you're in a whole new pipeline, there's a lot of visual effects that we added. But it was a really exciting piece, and it's just another good example of kind of authenticity in VR, and what better way than to actually become the Terminator and see in Terminator vision. So I actually have a really short behind-the-scenes video, if it will play. Yeah, here we go. Just to kind of give you an idea of how it's made.
We witness the Terminator run through the YouTube space, chasing and killing various YouTube stars.
You guys are always on set. You're always acting at all times. So even though you're waiting for your cue, you're still being seen by the camera and still performing, and Paradox will guide you. Hey, fire, rock!
In the 360 video, we relive through the eyes of the Terminator. We get to see what he sees and become the Terminator in virtual reality.
Right? Last shot, now to 1,000.
What happened? This was cool. Okay,
Yeah.
so it's
Yeah, let's go film it.
Yeah,
so I
let's
think
do
you
it.
get a sense now what you know what I mean?
yeah.
And the sentiment, if you saw the strikes that I was doing,
They were miles away from
and
the
they
actors,
look
and
like,
they look like they're being
And they
struck
look like
and
right
fall
there,
down.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Bless your face.
That's actually one of my favorite scenes, because when you have the VR headset on, you really do feel like Arnold Schwarzenegger is about to strangle you, which is a really crazy kind of feeling. So another example of kind of ways that we've worked with clients and brands is we were tapped by Exeter Agency to create a live-action surf experience. Again, apologies for the 2D representation here. Of a pro surfer to be shown at the World Surf League for certain events they were doing with Jeep. So their client Jeep, had a problem where they're really trying to get people into the new car, and they really want people to test drive the car, but obviously when you're on site of a World Surf League event, it's kind of hard to do that. So we came up with this concept of putting the virtual reality headsets inside the car, and then we created multiple sort of live action sequences of sports to sort of immerse people into the world of surfing. And surfing is really a great sport to do this with VR because, as you can imagine, it's just something that most people will never grasp, and a lot of people have interest in it. I mean, I'm actually an avid surfer myself, but I'm not at the level yet where I can get barreled. So I think for surfers or non-surfers, just to understand that sensation is like really an incredible thing. As you can imagine, it's hard enough to build a camera that's waterproof and then find a way to strap it to a surfer, much less catch a barrel, even if you're not shooting VR. So that was a really kind of fun and challenging task that we tasked with. So for this event in particular, it only went to select events, but it was a really great turnout for Jeep. I mean, they increased their event interest. They had lines out the door every day. They maxed out, the number of test drives. They increased their email capture and generated a lot of leads. But it wasn't until a couple of months later that the real KPIs came into effect. When I was giving a talk at Singularity University, and I was showing some demos before the talk, and this guy, Danny Kurtzman, rolled up in a wheelchair, and I showed him the surf experience because it's super fun and it's easy to navigate to and it's fairly short. And I could see this huge smile on his face. And when he took the headset off, he sort of looked almost in shock. And he then informed my business partner and I that he had literally never known what it's like to stand up. So it turns out that Danny Kurtzman has been in a wheelchair his entire life with muscle dystrophy. So he has literally never even had the sensation of knowing what it's like to stand at this level and to see out, much less surf. And it still gives me chills because it just kind of goes to show that just when you're solving for one problem, you actually end up solving another problem that you never could have even realized. After we sort of dropped viewers into some surf experiences, we were tapped by YouTube star Matt Pat and his show Game Lab to create 8-minute episodes in high-quality 360 that we wrote and shot and directed and produced and delivered in less than 4 months. So that's about 45 minutes of content and about 45 terabytes of data. So it's kind of a big testament to our pipeline and our team for being able to have these kind of fast turnarounds. But this is a really exciting series. It's available on YouTube. And basically, his show, Game Lab, is sort of like Mythbusters, where he takes situations or scenarios that would happen in video games, and then he tries to test them on how that would actually occur in real life. So we were tasked with coming up with some creative that would work best for 360 degrees to really immerse his viewers and fans into this show, which had everything from ostrich racing to car soccer to having to rent a castle in Napa and do sword fighting, all kinds of craziness. So I have a little clip here as well.
The first 360 episode we created was for the popular video game Mirror's Edge. Pat wanted it to look like the actual video games, so you can imagine how complicated this was knowing that we were shooting live action.
So all of our cameras are custom built from the ground up for each individual episode and what we need them to do. In this case, it really paid off. The cameras generate disparity maps, which give you a black and white image that shows you depth. We can combine that with some advanced visual effects, image processing, to create depth of field and selective color optimization. This allows us to composite the entire effect back together again to create footage that looks amazing like the actual video game footage, even though this was shot live action.
For Honor was one of the more visually impactful episodes. The difficult challenge with this episode was creating a convincing medieval battle scene within a fluid 360 story. The battle had to be meticulously choreographed in order to sell the realism all around the viewer.
The biggest undertaking for this episode was the sheer amount of pre-visualization of what the final piece should look like. In order to create the moody and dark atmosphere of this scene, we did a complete sky replacement, added fire, and also replaced the camera with a fully rendered 3D model helmet that accurately reflects the environment around us.
We also did some cool things with sound spatialization. You can hear each sound all around you and interact as you're encompassing the entire battle scene. Ultimately, we think this is one of the more visually impactful episodes.
So that kind of gives you an idea of how we have to make things, which requires a ton of effort and pre-production and planning to really kind of craft these narratives to make something work in VR. That was a really exciting piece for us. It actually won the first Streamy Award for VR in 2016, which beating out everyone on YouTube, essentially. So now that we've kind of covered some of the entertainment aspects and original content in VR, I thought I'd talk a little bit about virtual reality for commerce and business, which is also super exciting for us. Because again, it's about using the technology to solve problems that couldn't be solved before. And to give you an example of that, I don't know how many, are there any parents in the room? with kids? Okay, so quite a bit of you. So then you'll know exactly what I'm saying when I'm talking about baby proofing. I do not have a child myself, but my business partner and I found ourselves talking to our friends, who a lot of them are having their first time child, and so every conversation became about baby proofing and how they have to buy all this stuff for their house, and it just sounded crazy, and I'm like, the amount of hazards that are happening inside a home is terrifying to me, but really interesting. And we started putting our heads together because we're like, there just has to be a better way to do this, and especially given the fact that using immersive technologies like virtual reality and augmented reality, you can take real measurements inside your home. So you can actually spec out the right size requirements that you would need to buy products in your home, as well as shop and interact and virtually place them and try them out. So we came up with this concept called FAB, which stands for Families and Babies, and it's the first VR, AR platform and safety platform for consumers to shop in. We submitted it to the Walmart Innovate V-Commerce competition last fall, and we're one of 5 selected winners of the competition for this concept. It's a really contextual use of the experience. I have a kind of a tutorial here. We actually ended up concepting this and building it and doing the shopping configurator and all of that in about 2 months. So it's not fully polished here, but as you can see, it points out all of the hazards in your home that need baby proofing. So when you have the headset on, it'll identify those hazards, and when you look at it, you can click and interact and shop or find out more information about why it needs baby proofing. We actually also made it into a game for gamers, so the whole idea was don't kill the baby and see what needs baby proofing. So the future home for this would be, that was a model home that we created specifically for the Walmart competition, but the idea is that you would be able to leverage VR and AR together to scan a picture of your own home and then upload it and then put on the headset, and then it can identify all these hazards. And it doesn't necessarily have to be baby proofing. This would also work for any kind of safety hazard, or you think about floods, or if you're building a house, or insurance policies and things like that. This one was a experience we created with Accenture called Behind the Style, which just won Best Branded Commercial VR Experience.
An easy and relatable way for viewers to shop and interact with characters in a VR environment.
It's a VR experience where you actually get to go behind the scenes of a fashion shoot. You stand in the actual shoes of a stylist, directing your own photo shoot and seeing the actual outcome.
We were getting ready to launch the extended reality team at Accenture, and in doing that, we wanted to make sure that we had an experience that could showcase a possible vision for the future of commerce. We were also getting ready to sponsor Innovate, which is an event set up by Story8, the innovation arm of Walmart, all about envisioning what commerce in VR could look like.
You not only get to witness behind the scenes of an actual photo shoot, but learn from these stylists, becoming your own stylist and making your own choices.
You can choose a brunette model, and that will lead you to helping her choose what dress she's going to wear for the photo shoot. Or if you pick the blonde model, you get to help her figure out what type of hairstyle she's going to have for the photo shoot.
We're using 4 or 5 different kinds of technology that hasn't been implemented before. This idea of a branching narrative, playing on a mobile player over a phone, also with all the additional pop-ups and experiences and allowing you to try the products out, and also it adds a certain complexity to the story that's much more interesting, and you really feel like you're involved.
A window opens up exactly where the makeup table is going to be. You can really see what different colors of eyeshadow or lipstick or rouge could look like on the model herself. And you see her look change depending on what you select. And you get to see the final result as the photo shoot.
It's a great use of virtual reality, a chance to actually be a stylist, which is something most people don't do. So you get to learn and experience and be a part of something that's interesting.
Well, we really feel this is the first time that we have such a seamless integration of a 360 video, interactive elements, and an entertaining story at the same time, with commerce elements embedded in it.
We used our latest in branching interactive video to let you learn and experience in a way no other technology can.
360 video with interactive elements is an easier production for any brand or any company. You can piggyback on that production, extend it a little bit, and find yourself with an immersive experience that you can then distribute in VR or maybe something in AR.
Wow, that's awesome!
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, and if Walmart could be synced up with it, you could just like add your profile, you could add your card.
Within 2-3 years, we will get to the point of truly wanting to shop in a specific way in VR. This is really just an idea of what that could look like in the future.
So to sort of reiterate, we actually showed this same piece at the Walmart Innovate competition because we had partnered with Accenture to sort of create this vision for virtual reality and commerce. So you kind of saw Fab was a very contextual use of the platform. This time we really wanted to see what we could do in entertainment and with fashion and retail. And I think there's a lot of VR experiences out there right now that are just sort of recreating a physical storefront in VR, which is great, and there's certainly a place for that. But we really wanted to kind of think through creative solutions of things that you could produce and do now. And what we did with that was we came up with this mobile gaze-driven experience. So everywhere you look, it just automatically starts playing, and you're allowed to interact with products. This actually is a demo, but the shopping configurator does work. It's available for our app in Specular Theory. And it's cool because there's branching narrative that we built into it. So while you're shopping and you're immersed in behind the scenes of a fashion shoot, you can interact with the products, and then the stylists are talking to you and asking you choices of which dress to choose and what hairstyle to choose. And you actually can make that choice, and then you watch it unfold in front of you. So it just sort of adds this other level of immersion that you couldn't be done before. And by shooting it in live action and by adding this branching narrative element, it required a lot more creativity up front, but it's a lot more cost-effective solution than if you're talking about using holograms or volumetric capture or things like that. So VR training was just something I wanted to touch on also, which I find really fascinating, is we sort of saw with the success of perspective and the idea of using VR to create empathy and to have this first-person point of view. So we're working right now with diversity and inclusion programs and to help train top executives at companies, because you can essentially use VR and use our platform to help generate empathy and identify unconscious bias and discrimination in the workplace and help prevent sexual harassment and things like that. You can improve employee performance by immersing them into scenarios that might be highly stressful or to sort of unlock what's happening with your company culture. And the program will basically, it knows where you looked and for how long, or if you're interviewing someone in VR, in this example, then it'll monitor and track and be adaptive sort of analytics. So it's just another sort of, I think, more efficient way to train employees rather than just doing a survey a few hours a year. Location-based entertainment, also something we're tackling. About 12 months ago, we ended up looking at location-based entertainment, which is really kind of the win-win-win right now for consumers and brands and businesses, because you don't have to worry about the home market and headsets being in every home, and you can go to these places. Consumers don't have to buy all the equipment. But my partner and I went, and we were super excited about it. And at the time, we realized there were so many sort of home-based versions of games at locations, and they weren't actual games that were created for the location itself, which is sort of a missed opportunity in a lot of ways, particularly from marketing, but also you're not optimizing the space. Like, you get a lot of this with controllers, and these games are kind of made for at-home experiences. So when you're at a location, you really want to make it something easy for consumers. It's got to be mainstream. It's got to be repeatable. You can't have anything with too many configurations or crazy controllers or things that will bug out. And in my opinion, every location should be all mixed reality and green screen, and so it should be equally entertaining as a spectator event as well as participating in it. So we have a really exciting game that unfortunately I'm not able to share today, but is coming out in the next couple of months, which basically tackles and solves a lot of these issues. So in 2019, if I have the privilege of being here again, I look forward to telling you about this massive sort of retail experience we're creating for location-based entertainment, as well as the launch of Perspective Chapter 3, to really raise empathy and tackle more problems, including gun violence and America's epidemic and mass incarceration. So I can just say we've never really been accused of a lack of ambition. But there's really no reason to be unambitious here, because we're creating new languages that enrich people's lives and create real first-person memories. I mean, what's the ROI on giving someone the chance to walk again, or giving someone the chance to know what it's like to stand up? What's the ROI on offering new perspectives that can help transform and transcend humanity, or tackle and help reduce things like hatred and gun violence? What's the ROI on if someone gives you the chance to experience the impossible? Like, how could you ever possibly forget it? So I'm not just standing here today to ask you to think differently, I'm daring you to. So if you want to be a part of this new immersive medium, and you're really excited about VR and AR and what this has to do, and this new world of possibilities that we're discovering, then let's chat. Let's get started on some creative disruption, and we'll invent some awesome new toys along the way. Thank you.
You're not home safe, that's it. The problem, I guess, for you as a VR content maker, isn't that that there's a physical need, the headset, to get out to the audience? Isn't that a problem?
For the home market?
Yeah.
It is not a problem I'm concerned with. I will say that the home market isn't quite, it's not mainstream yet, obviously, but I'm extremely confident that it will be soon. I think that when you see things like location-based entertainment, that's why it's such an immediate solution and path to revenue. But when I look big picture, I think about the fact that when every child and every family starts having a VR headset as a textbook, which I do believe they will because it is so powerful as an education tool, then now you've got a headset in every home, and then it's oh, and by the way, you can entertain yourself. So I think while some predictions expected maybe the home market and entertainment to take off so much, everything's fast growing, and I have no doubt in my mind.
What about the improvement of the society, what we are? You can see there's health tech, you talk about training, and of course all the culture and entertainment.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. Like I was rented a bike yesterday, and I was like riding all over Copenhagen, and I kind of had this thought that if you think about all the experiences you've had as a person, like the places you've traveled, the place you grew up, like the people you know, the food that you've tasted, where you went to school, like all of these experiences that really make up who you are as a person. And I think with virtual reality, I mean, you have the ability to actually sort of hack your understanding of the world in a matter of minutes. And I think that's going to be an incredibly powerful tool for us individually, but also just collective as a society, particularly for people who, aren't as fortunate as us to travel and be at places like this.
Ryan Pulliam, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Take it.